Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. If you know the title of this episode, then you know more than I do. I was just at one of my favorite places on planet Earth here in Huntington Beach, where we sing and we do all kinds of stuff. I'm hooking up some of my comedians here in OC from LA. And I got friends with venues, and oh man, it's going to be cool. And I'm invited in after closing. We shut the whole place down and we just held a nightcap together and bumped into this dude that's a legit rocker from back in the day. Can't say his name because I don't have permission. Man, he just, I don't know, souped up my brain. What's funny about it is I was talking to him and he starts talking about subjects that we talk about from the sciences, from like vibrational frequencies of existence to the Illuminati to a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, dude, you'll love this. You'll love the show. You'll love the show. You'll love the people. You'll love everything. You're going to have a community. This is why we made this whole thing, you know. But he's in that stage that we all go through, which is this super passion stage where you're like, I don't like what's going on in the world. I'm a man, a real man. And my duty to God and this planet is to clean it up. And there's all kinds of ways you can do that, you know. The best way is obviously to do it in a peaceful manner. No man, I don't think has ever had to chase someone down and enjoy it, you know, like Wyatt Earp's story of Tombstone having to get rid of all the red sash dudes, Powers Booth and the gang, right? And it just got me thinking about, you know, we are going through that phase sometimes. And then he says this really interesting statement, which maybe this can be the theme of the show, because I've definitely gone through this in the last year, and I've shared it with friends of mine of different origins. And it's really interesting because it's a very galvanizing subject to discuss and admit. It's sort of along the lines of admitting to someone that you're having suicidal thoughts. It's along those lines, but it has nothing to do with suicide whatsoever. And the line of thought is, and line of discussion is, you get mad at God. And you're not supposed to do that. Just inherently, you almost feel like you're not supposed to do it, which is kind of interesting because your kids definitely get mad at you, and you can dial back to any phase of when you think the world in your area of the world was well-trained and well-disciplined and really producing good families and good businesses and what have you, good people. And you'll still have kids get mad at their parents. Whether they express it in a way that gets their butt ripened or not, they still have the feeling. They don't understand why there's something is a particular way that it is, right? And I'm sure that a bunch of us who are, for the lack of a better term, God-fearing, we feel the same way sometimes. And the more you get, you know, to becoming, you know, a man. And ladies, I think that you're more mature than this, so I'm just not going to lump you into this. I've never heard a woman ever admit something like this, at least to me personally. And I have to say, even all the television shows I've ever seen or any type of documentary, I don't remember a woman ever saying this, but I've definitely heard men say this several times, which is you get pissed at God. And sometimes I don't think there's much of a difference in getting pissed at God and holding it all in and then saying, well, at least I didn't say anything. Maybe there's some merit to that. I'm not that kind of guy. I say it. I need to say it. I need God to hear my voice. I need God to know how I feel. God knows I'm not a jerk. I am not someone who's going to casually say something to God ever, no matter how playful it is or how abrasive it might be. But you know, I tell you guys all the time that if there is a devil, he's running the planet. Every single piece of shit human being who's got a fucking position of power in this goddamn world is a goddamn Satanist, save maybe like a teeny tiny handful of people who are still good and still trying. But by God, they're, 10,000, 100,000, 1,000,000 to one. And we revere them, we see them make speeches, and we see them try to affect change. But of course, there's so many scumbag sellouts that you just have to believe that whatever story they're getting from their side, they're either getting told that Satan is more powerful than God in an absolute manner, or they have no belief in God whatsoever because they heard that Francis Bacon wrote the King James Bible. I just recently found this channel on YouTube. And it's funny, yesterday I could remember the last word, not the first word. And I can't remember the last word. It's, I'll find it here. Yeah. His channel is called Atlantean Gardens. He's kind of like us. Except he has his degree in anthropology. He's got a super duper open mind. It's really, really cool. He covers all these subjects. He does an exhaustive, brilliant job. It was his episode about the giants and the pygmies that gave me what I needed to get going. And of course, it's our observations on top of his observations that give us our formula for our show. But I believe it's his channel. He did an episode about the King James Bible being released in the same year that the complete works of Shakespeare was released, which is 1611. And what he said was, he goes, look, when the King James Bible came out, scholars, priests of all kind went to the king's men and said, where did you get the information to write this Bible? You know, predominantly the New Testament, because the Old Testament had been around for a long time. And they were given no sources whatsoever. And of course, in 47, you've got the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I believe are a complete hoax. Same exact year, you've got all these scrolls about the Anunnaki being dug up in Egypt, I believe. Another hoax. I mean, man, dude, just create some Hollywood and people will believe it. It's really disgusting. But Shakespeare apparently was like this ignorant peasant who never really was known for anything. His daughters, which he had two of, apparently died, according to this guy, being completely illiterate. So you have this massively brilliant human being without a life that would mirror the writing accomplishments. You can only write what you know. All right. And that's the first thing that kids need to understand when they're in college. You know, you'll ask them about, what are you going to write? You know, I'm going to write this movie. And then in the end, they want to pick some super duper deep intellectual journey of which they have never experienced. And so you get this trite sort of kind of kid's impersonation of being an adult. And of course, no one buys the script. And so when you get a prodigy that can pull that off, that's why they're prodigies. Super duper insightful kids, right? Francis Bacon is this amazing philosopher, historian, scientist. I mean, this dude's like a baller in brain world. And so he does have the capacity to write this kind of stuff. And it's sort of interesting that you're about to release a doctrine to ice down the Church of England. And of course, you want to also release fictional stories which embed the belief in the stories and set a precedence for how the human mind should work. And of course, they're works of art. So is the Bible. Scholars of the time for the next 50 to 100 years, apparently, according to this gentleman who runs this channel, said that the likenesses of the formulas for how the metaphor in Shakespeare is written is very indicative of how the metaphor of Christ's life happened. In that, you know, for those of you who read, you know, the QAnon posts and all that kind of stuff, my God, I mean, it's just an open book of, it could be anything. You just bring your narrative to a Q post and you will have a connection somehow. I watch it all the time. It's absolutely freaking impossible besides God himself or herself writing these posts to match them to time and make sure the clock works. It's all bullshit, people. And what I'm saying is it's not taking anything away from that particular movement potentially being real, that there was this agency and these guys that were writing the real stuff into their posts. It's what people do to it that is where I think the bullshit starts. You know, if I took any one of your lives and I wrote a topographical or topography copy of your life, but I blew it into metaphor instead of the exact specifics of your life. Okay, well, a struggle is a struggle is a struggle. You know, a success is success. So you could read into a struggle and say, well, I had a struggle too, and then this passage is my passage. And perhaps that has great value in that you would derive from your life the idea that someone else is struggling with you. I mean, if you have a perception otherwise, you need to get out a little bit more. But this whole idea of like just breaking loose and going, look, damn me if you will. There is, I did this last year. I had a rant against God. And I'm talking to God like he exists. I believe he exists. But I'm not happy with the way the world's being run. I'm not happy with kids getting raped because an optic has to be modified or maintained. Because there's a bunch of morons out there. A bunch of people are dead. A bunch of people are dead. A bunch of people committed suicide since this hoax started. They would be alive today. The loss of a suicide, for especially these young kids that are doing it, right? Like I told you, we have in my family alone, it's a married-in family, but it's we still love them to death. An 18-year-old kid who was already suffering from issues, mental issues, like depression, finally just got the straw that broke her back, and she's gone. If 2020 didn't happen, maybe, I think there'd be a high likelihood that this kid could have maintained that functional depression, grown up, got into college. She was 18 years old. She hadn't even gone to college yet. She hadn't fallen in love yet. I mean, it's like there's so many things that could have grabbed her and her career or whatever and pulled her forward. Never get the chance. We, regardless of what's real in this conspiracy world or not, there's a lot of kids and adults who have suffered greatly because these evil forces have been able to amass so much power. And believe me, I understand the whole idea of God saying, hey, I'm not here to control you. You guys have to control, the stuff for yourself. But there becomes a point of no return in every society where those who get there first drink the Kool-Aid of power, become corrupt absolute, and then expand their empire over hundreds, if not thousands of years, getting complete and utter control over society. And at that point, you need a creator to step in and go, well, I've created a overly flawed creature. Because we always end up here, don't we? We always end up here. And so I got to step in. I've created a robot that goes into a loop. I have not created a sufficiently accurate being to rule their own world. It's on him. It's not on me. I didn't make man. I grew up fine. I think my head's on my shoulders. I think my feet are on the ground. If there was a bunch of me's out there, there wouldn't be this craziness. I assume the same with you. And so it gets frustrating, and you have to kind of apply pressure. Again, the reason why the world's great in any one area of the world is because someone got tired of it sucking. And they said, I'm going to take this, I got enough knowledge, enough time, enough money. I may or may not even want to do this. Donald Trump, I don't think he wanted to be president. As much as everyone thinks he's a narcissist and things. I don't know. He could have been president a long time ago, in my opinion. A much younger man with a lot more vinegar in him. But instead he waited till he was in his 70s to go. And now supposedly he's got to run in 2 or whatever, 4 more years or so, whatever. I'm not, whatever. I have no opinion of that anymore. I think we've been had. And I think that a good man went in, and just like, Orlando Brown, the rapper, said, he goes, yeah, I think he's an asshole and he's rich. And I think a guy like that could get shit done. Is he going to be an asshole? Yeah. Is he going to be rich? Yeah. But those kind of guys get things done. Those brilliant statements I ever heard. And then he says in this interview in 2016 with Vlad, the super douchebag liberal, who goes, he says to Vlad, he goes, I don't think he's going to get two terms, but he's going to get the one. But he's going to be such an asshole, he's not going to be allowed to get the second one. The kid was totally right. I don't know how old this guy was, but he was calling the shots dead on honest, man. We're scared, aren't we? We're scared to throw down with the creator. And I'm, the fabric of my being, and this is what I told God. I said, look, man, if this is the way you're going to make the universe, where every single time I get reincarnated, I get thrown into this shit show that you've created where it's just, you give me my hopes and dreams and then you squash them. And then if I happen to succeed, I've got to drink kids' blood because I'm at a party. Otherwise, I'm not in the crowd. I've got to sell my soul out to stay with the powerful. So if I go in the powerful side, I turn out to be the sociopath person. which apparently is what, God likes to run his show. And then there's a bunch of people struggling down below. And I understand. I mean, the thing is like, if you go, well, life needs struggles. Okay, yeah, I agree, man. And without these assholes running the world, there is plenty of struggle. One common denominator of struggle for any living being on this planet is we're not immortal. Our bodies get old and they deteriorate, and we've got to deal with that. Sid told me to my face, he was quoting someone else, and he said, getting old is one of the most courageous things you can do. I have a buddy of mine, he's in his early 70s, he's sitting next to me at the lounge. He's struggling with Parkinson's. His meds are doing, his dopamine pills are taking care of him so far. He's had it for quite a few years. But someone on the TV said, getting old is really rough. We're watching some old Japanese cartoon. And he goes, that's for sure. And here's a guy that's having to balance himself to get out of his chair. I don't know how many years my friend's got. Did he have to have a Rothschild take his money to have that lucid moment in life? Absolutely not. He just has to wake up every day. Accidents happen, right? Accidents happen in this world. Take people's lives. Real accidents. Everyone's trying to pay attention to the maximum capability of their being. No one's being negligent. And accidents happen. And then we have all the in-betweens where someone is being negligent. We have natural disasters. We do have plagues that come by because we don't understand how medicine works sometimes, Not what we're dealing with now. But, like rats were causing the Black Plague. What do you think it felt like to be, and it's all magical. The body's magical. The Catholic Church doesn't allow us to look inside the human body, so we have no idea what anatomy is all about. The Jews and the Arabs are cutting it all up and naming everything. And we're sitting here dying. And the metaphors of like man creating competitions with animals, where the dog fights and the cock fights back in the days, and there's all kinds of animal fights they've got going. If you've never seen a cockfight, two roosters put in a pen together, going to the death. It's one of the most gruesome things you will ever see in your life, and it's just two basically male chickens. They will peck themselves to death, and even the one that survives is bleeding out bad. I have never seen any detailed, nor do I ever want to see a dog fight. The kind that the rappers were all known for. Two pit bulls tearing each other apart. What sick fuck wants to see that? What is it? At most sociopaths and killers and especially those serial killers, they all have a history of first starting with animals and killing them until the point they wear themselves down and life and death merges into one moment. And perhaps they even get some epiphany of reincarnation. They go, well, I'm not really killing anything. It's just like a video game. You just rebirth. Not registering that they're robbing that individual life force of its life, that it has the right to be in. What was it, Django? The DiCaprio character, pitting his slaves against each other, making two walk in, one walk out. And them realizing at some point they got to do it. Now, that was a movie, but I wouldn't put it past, history to have done that. I've never read a book that said that happened. But when I saw it, I was like, yeah, man, that's not even the worst thing that happens. South America, that's super duper religious, but Catholic churches are all over the place. There's no shortage of gangbangers that will murder entire towns, throw babies over border fences, dropping them 40 feet or whatever it is. It's like, how is it that you've got a super indoctrinated religious sect in an entire continent, but Brazil videos of just murdering teenagers left and right? It's all gone. If it's there, it's pointless to be there because no one's following the doctrine. But what does the Pope deal with? The Pope deals with first world problems, trying to socially engineer to the agenda. Just as fast as the story of Christ starts to get fabricated into existence in Europe, that church is molesting kids. It goes all the way up into the 20th century. It's probably still happening in the 21st. They probably figured out a way to buy off the press and whatever. But we know all the way through the 90s and for the 90s that priests were being moved around the world, violations from 500 kids to 1,500 kids, politicians all over the world doing the same thing. What was it? Cameron, the Prime Minister of England, hid a guy who was doing it. He was a big part of the parliament over there, and he assigned the guy's sister to take care of the investigation, and she dismissed the case. He says straight to the face of all the senators over there, "I'm not going to tell you what this guy did because it'd be a big problem for the national image of the country if this ever got out." Jimmy Savile gets to live his whole life to the very end. Freud's nephew gets to live his life to the very end. And we got a ton of people alive right now in the United States and Europe that have done all these things and worse. And they're going to get to live their entire lives. In fact, a bunch of them, if they died today, have already had the maximum intake of this content. They're only going to miss a few kids at the end. And we're all sitting around worried about whether or not a mask that has been said to not protect you against viral matter 5 times by the CDC, now recently by Stanford. We're worrying about whether or not someone's wearing that standing next to us when we're the burden on society if we decide to go out and we're concerned about it. So yeah, I think there is a reason to have a beef. And you know what? When I was talking to God, I was remembering the old story inside Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the book by Robert Kiyosaki. If you haven't read this book, it's about 1/2 inch thick, super duper tiny, and it will re-engineer your brain. All Robert Kiyosaki's books will re-engineer your brain. Apparently he's got a board game. I've never seen it. I mean, I've seen it, but never played it. But in this book, he talks about he and his buddy, they're like 9 years old and they're trying to make money as kids. And so they end up melting down coins and turning them into raw like nuggets and then going off and trying to sell them. And the rich dad, so the way that it works out is Robert Kiyosaki's father's a teacher. He's like, I think he's half Japanese, half maybe Chinese or Hawaiian or something. I can't remember exactly his configuration, but he said his dad was just by the book, man. Follow the rules, get your retirement. And his father was actually in the pocket where that was actually going to physically work out. Would never be rich, but he'd be okay. His buddy, this white kid, has got a dad who owns most of the pineapple plantations in Hawaii before Dole turned them all into GMO factories, right? Whole place is GMO now. Only places are not GMO in Hawaii are like individuals like us that care about health. So the guy finds him doing this and he's like, well, one, that's illegal for you to be melting coins, so let's stop that right away. And now let's get you a real job. And so he owned a convenience store on his Dole plantation, which is a highway, and so everyone's invited to go into this little convenience store. The job they were going to do is to stock the shelves and, align the products. Just like we'll be little stock boys. I can't remember how long they worked there, but it seems like it was a few weeks at least. And the rich dad's son seemed to be fairly content with the job, and Robert's like, I don't want to do this anymore. So on one of the days, he gets picked up by the rich dad to be taken home. He says to the rich dad, I don't want to do this job anymore. I am bigger than this. And the rich dad said, good. You finally learned the first lesson. This is a bullshit job. Now let's go get you a real job. They're little kids, And he also told a little sub-story, which was he bawled out the father and he goes, why do you pay the woman who works there so little money that she can't have a nice car? And she was talking about money problems the entire time we're working there. And he looks at Robert and he says, I pay her exactly the amount of money that she thinks I should pay her. And that's her fault. Lesson number 2. So the idea about recalling that story when I'm talking to God is one of these things of we have so much to give the universe. But look at how so many of the gifts that we could be giving the universe are destroyed because the economy sucks. There's a bunch of morons out there trying to get rid of all your rights. So you're like, okay, I got my entertainment career over here, which I could probably get going if I completely focus in whatever I'm trying to do. But my country's falling apart over here. So as I'm entertaining myself, making big bucks, there'll be no place to spend those bucks because I'm going to end up in a 2030 concentration camp over here, especially if I don't take a vaccine. I'm totally going to end up in a camp and maybe exterminated. Who knows? So I can't focus completely over here. I got to do this thing over here. A bunch of noble people have lost giant portions of their life because of these algorithms showing up on their watch. You might say, well, then maybe God wants us to, fight for what is righteous. And so I say, okay, great. But how many times does God have to want that out of man? If you're literally writing artificial intelligence for a robot and you wanted to see this algorithm pop out, your coding has to hit a critical point where the robot preserves his own life. He's doing the Asimov rules or what have you. Okay, hopefully you're not some crazy masochistic sadist who is like, I'm going to put my robot through this constantly over and over and over again, instead of creating a genetic code that says, you know how when you're born, your autonomic system takes over and it pumps your blood and you know how to breathe and you know how to walk? The mare can walk within a few minutes of being born. The bug knows to do the bug things and the bird knows how to migrate and all that kind of stuff. It's just in your system. It's your instincts. Well, when does man get any decent instincts anymore? So we keep getting born stupid and more stupid and more stupid. All it takes is the TV to destroy man. An internet page, an app on your phone. So what's the thing? Are we in this constant habitual Job experiment? The story of Job, which is apparently one of the first books ever transcribed from wherever this stuff comes from. And again, the Old Testament is so old. When people tell me these things, did you know that the story of Job was the oldest book written? Whatever. But it has got to be one of the most hideous, narcissistic, horrible things if you really just pull back. And I think that man's primitive mind, when this first hit the airwaves, seemed noble and interesting. But if you really think about it, it's just hideous. The story is the devil comes up to God and says, there's that dude down there named Job. One guy argued with me. It's called Job. His real pronunciation was Job. And it's like, dude, what do you care, man? Santa Claus, Sandy Claus, who cares? It's fiction. It's a metaphor. Relax, bro. This never happened, okay? You're missing the point. But the devil says to God, okay, I bet I can get that guy to hate you. And God goes, no, but I don't think he can. And so God makes a deal with the devil, the thing you're never supposed to do. And he says, okay, kills all of his animals, kills his kids, kills his wife. Dude stays true. God blesses him back with all that stuff. Then he kills his kids, kills his cattle, decimates his farms, kills his wife. Still doesn't turn. And then apparently guy goes, all right, you had enough rounds on that dude. I'm going to restore everything with it. Now, the guy's probably psychologically, in a corner, in a fetal position, sucking his thumb, even though God's given him all this stuff. He's just mentally destroyed. He makes Edgar Allan Poe look like, Robin Williams on crack. Who would do that? Who would do that? The idea, too, is that we want to give, in other passages, we give God all this credit for knowing everything. He's deterministic in his mind. He knows the end of your life the minute you're born. He knows all your decisions. He knows everything, knows everything. So the test was a bogus situation. But if the tests were real, if you really think that story happened, then you're basically looking at abuse. You're looking at child abuse. If man is the child of God, then it's child abuse. And that's sort of the tact I took with God, was like, look, we are your children. I wouldn't let any of my children go through the crap that I have seen go on in this world. Now, do I carry everything for my kid? Do I make sure my kid is, you have to put your clothes on. Okay, let me put them on. You have to do your hair. Let me do your hair for you. No. She handles her own stuff, right? She has to learn right from wrong. I mean, you teach your kids right from wrong, and then you let them hopefully have the programming that lets them figure that out. If they get something severely wrong, hopefully it's not terminal, and hopefully you can get your word in edgewise, and they listen to you, that sort of thing. Well, we have plenty of advice about how to get it right. So I think the first solution for re-engineering man is to give us an instinct to not be pieces of shit. To give us an instinct that would be this righteous feeling of we know what's right from wrong, and we simply wouldn't do these other things to each other. And for the majority of, say, the mid-19th century, I guess to say 20th century, maybe probably 19th century as well, in America at least, there was a lot of really beautiful little towns and cities operated the same way. You can watch old movies and see how it works. You can watch not movies, but documented conversations with people. And, like when you watch all the old Roswell interviews from everybody in the town that was just a normal citizen at the time of this crash. And the old interview with the woman who thought that the government killed her best friend because she was the secretary who was shown the body. And she accidentally went home and told her family, and then her kids went to school and told everybody at school. And the government said, well, you shouldn't have done that. And she ends up dying in a hotel, registered to her sister, dying exactly the same death that was going to be projected on Marilyn Monroe, who did have a substance abuse problem. Hence her last movie, The Misfits, she takes 2 weeks off to rehabilitate, of which I just saw last night. So maybe you're saying, okay, so instincts would prevent a tremendous amount of death, murder, usury, consumption. Marketing departments would have to tell the truth. It'd be like Jim Carrey's movie Liar Liar, which is actually Twilight Zone from back in the day. Used car salesman is sold an old car, and if the car is cursed, if you buy the car, then you have to tell the truth until you can convince someone else to buy it off of you. But you have to be honest while they're trying to buy it off of you, so you have to tell the person that it's cursed and that you can't tell a lie if you buy it. You have to tell them all that stuff. But let's say for some reason there's a big rationale why those instincts can't be installed in man. Again, you're still going to have trials and tribulations. You're still going to get old. You're still going to have people, not want to do what you want them to do. It doesn't fix the entire human condition. You're going to fall in love with people that don't fall in love with you. You're going to have a best friend, and they're not going to be your best friend, later on in life. There's all kinds of amazing spectrum of emotions that still exist after the solution's injected into our DNA. Or when our soul can control a bit more of our body. It's another way to accomplish it. For all I know, it's fluoride-based. You just punch out the pineal gland, and then the body can't attach to the soul properly, and that's where you get these kids that burn down their own house to prove the point. The second tier that could be, if you can't do the first one, and so you're going to have all these jerk-offs doing all this stuff. Well, the second the guy plans to kill his wife, he gets caught. It doesn't work. The gun jams. Whatever happens. His car blows up on the way to his wife's house, or, whatever he's trying to do, he's got a problem. And that's only necessary if you can't whisper into his ear and give him some epiphanies of perspective and go, hey, there's a lot more fish in the sea. No matter what your wife did, whether she slept with another man or just simply doesn't like you anymore, you can find someone who likes being abused. Go for it. Or you should be a better man. And what's interesting about this, when I shared it with at least one of my friends, very devout man, and what's interesting about it is that his style of communicating religion is to, when you tell him something like this, he's lived a very normal life. He's definitely sinned in the eyes of God to the extreme of perhaps just being shy of killing a man. And so he salivates at the notion that, oh my God, I have done all these horrible things in front of God. I've asked for forgiveness, and which most likely that's the case, and he's going to get it. And so, but when you start sinning in his eyes, questioning God and all this other stuff, he tries to get sort of like bonus points with God by trying to attack you passively about, oh man, I wouldn't dare talk like that, man. You're going to end up going to hell, and you're just like, dude, can we have an intelligent conversation here for 1 second? Can you just put away your 1840 interpretation of the King James Bible just for 1 second so that we can actually have a conversation here? Because we're way more grown up in 2021, some of us, than the people that lay down all that fire and brimstone, black and white horse shit that you're following. Just imagine. I mean, what is possible in God's universe is hideous, man. Hideous. If you had a party, we're just gonna bring this down to like super duper sparks flying, metal hitting the pavement, hitting the concrete, and blowing out sparks, man. I told you recently about the story of the little girl who, in trying to cross the border, because Biden told everybody to do it, I don't know how old this girl is, apparently over 5, but under 10. She gets raped so hardcore she doesn't have a voice when they find her because she's been screaming so much and she was really brutalized physically. That's happening on God's watch. He has allowed a Satan-worshipping dude to be in office, a complete fucking pedophile with a super pedophile kid. And this happened on his watch. But it also happened on the big man's watch. So now let's bring that event down and let's use some typology to retell it into our world. You got kids, and you're having a little pool party for your kids. Perhaps you have a daughter, right? And you got a little pool party. You got a nice crib. It's all good. You've been blessed. And some other kids come over. Some other little girls come over. And somehow, during this little Christmas party or birthday party or whatever it is, probably birthday party, one of the other kids gets the treatment that this little girl got at the border just a couple months ago. She gets brutalized, doesn't have a voice. She's been sexually violated. She's been mentally traumatized to the point where she will never, ever, ever be the same. She may never be a child again, but she hasn't even grown out of the genes that deem her to be physically a child. And this happens on your watch. You created the situation. You neglected to supervise these children. Wherever the guys came from that did this, you could have stopped them easily, but you didn't. What are you going to feel like in this paradigm of religion, of Christianity, when you go to heaven? You're supposed to go to hell now because you just organized a situation where a kid was destroyed. So you go to hell and God's just fine. God's just fine because it's happening thousands of times, probably a month around this planet. That's the exact same situation. If the kid even survives and gets picked up by anybody. Again, the number we learned in 2018, 2019 is 800,000 kids disappear in the United States alone every year. When scratched out for the index of kids that are old enough to run away and actually survive the streets, which is sort of a bullshit statistic anyway. There's still over 50% of the kids are disappearing. So we're talking about 12 and under is disappearing with a huge surge under 10 every year. And that's in a registered superpower of the world. More powerful than all the other countries combined, as this North Korean kid just said. All right, well, that's the best it gets. What's it like in all the other countries where the citizens literally love their captors? They love their kings and queens. They love their bankers. They love them. The kids that were fighting against the 1% are the same kids that just made the 1%. I don't know. Before last year was over, they had quadrupled their wealth, and now it's another 8 months later. What is it now? Are they 6, 7, 8 times more rich than they were before? All these little mom and pop shops are disappearing. Corporations are just scooping up all the real estate that people can't pay for. So people are ignorant enough to pay the late fees on stuff at this point when they're not even allowed to work. Let's say that Wednesday treatment I talked about starts ending people's lives through immune deficiency. It's one thing this guy brought up today. The first thing out of his mouth was about injecting you with something. It was interesting. He didn't say all the normal phrases. He was wondering if I was following him because I'm sure he's used to talking to people that don't know. By the time we were done talking half an hour, the dude I was talking to today, about half an hour after we got done talking, he realized he was at home. So now let's think about this. Let's say that this all makes sense to you and you're like, yeah, well, I guess we cannot believe that God is this man-made thing, that man has made God. No matter what religion you worship, he's not that dude. He doesn't do the things that the Bible says. He definitely doesn't do the things that Lynn Wood thinks is going to take place. He just doesn't. He doesn't do the things that Juan O'Savin says he's going to do. He lets you burn on this fucking planet. Over and over. And fuck, for all we know, we're in a prison, right? Who knows? Got a helicopter following me around. So we, as intellectual human beings, of which is also a gift. And it's funny, I heard a Instagram live event with Hobson, and they mentioned God to him, and he just looks at the camera and he goes, is there a God? Is there? I don't know, man. And again, those who are privileged in this world to never have gone through anything, they're sitting in the Midwest, they just followed all the rules, they got their little shot, they got their mask on, or whatever the fuck they're doing, they don't get it. They've barely lived any life. God bless you, man. You're some of my favorite people in the world, but man, they'll take a shit on people because we have actually experienced like 50 to 100 times more life than they have. We have met 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 people when they've only met maybe 5. And they barely remember 2. You know, one of those kind of things. So if God is really just this omnipotent, hold it all together thing, and he's just like, look, man, all I know how to do is just hold this together. I don't even have a conscience. I don't have consciousness. All I'm doing is I'm providing the medium with which you can have any experience. So you're fighting your fight. I'm fighting my fight. I got my responsibilities. Think of this whole universe as a body, and I'm just the autonomic system that makes sure the blood flows. You individually get a copy, an instance of a brain, which we call your soul on his level. Seems like God is a dude, huh? See, if God was a woman, she wouldn't allow this to happen. So then, if we were to re-engineer our mind to think like that, then you get to prison rules of life, which is a Satanistic rule of life, which is perhaps why those who run the world do live by Satanistic principles, which is very simple. Protect your own and do whatever you want to do to protect your own. Now, before I let that go too far, most of us can't do it. We just can't do it, and nothing will ever convert our soul. We'd rather fucking die and have our little fucking light just squished out, right? Just like, hey, don't bring me back to this shithole that you've created, because this ain't worth doing again. Because I don't want to get caught up in being the little girl next time. I don't want to get caught up being the guy who's so fucking stupid he's raping a little girl. I don't want to be R. Kelly, ever. I don't want to be LeBron James, ever. I don't want to be George Bush Sr., Jeb Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld. I don't want to be those people ever in my lifetime. Don't cast me as Iago. Cast me as Othello. So then you might take the attitude, well, dude, you can't know good unless you know bad. I agree. But let me ask you this. If I said, well, you can't know the volume of a stereo until you, 1, turn it down so you can't hear anything, and it's not even music anymore, or you turn it to 11 and it's so loud it's making you have tinnitus and making you go deaf. But we're constantly, irrationally, jamming this thing up and down. God never stops touching the freaking dial. Like, dude, wait. 7.5 is my volume. Right now, 7.5 is where I want it. And you know why? Because the universe has actually been beautifully designed. And this is starting to give credit back to a more omnipotent God, not the man-made one, which is what I'm having the frustration with. At 7.5, and music is a perfect metaphor for this entire conversation. Prince was once asked, do you think you'll ever run out of music? And he said, there are only so many notes on a piano, so maybe, yeah. Later, in his later interviews, he had an interview in Paris once, and they asked him the same question. He goes, I'm just getting started. Don't worry about it. He had figured out his problem. And the big problem, and he's a genius. I mean, whatever he created, his spectrum of ability to create with Mozart and Beethoven and Bach and all these individuals, they realize at some point you've genetically learned music a particular way. So you have certain keys that you gravitate to in your mind because that's how you learned music. When you dabbled in, and when you get out of like sheet music and you start writing your own music, you start getting into keys that work for you and you tend to gravitate back to them. Plus you have a music industry that'll say, hey, rip off your own song as much as you possibly can. I forgot the band. What's the band that makes You Dropped the Bomb on Me? Anyway, they were told once, just try to rip off You Dropped a Bomb on Me as many times as you can. And they did. And they actually did a really good job. But you can only do about 3 or 4 times and your career is over. Unless you can re-engineer your mind to say, I know how to literally specifically move my mind from the one key that I've been living in for the last 2 to 5 years to a whole nother key and never, ever go back to the old keys. And that's one thing Prince started doing beautifully. And then what Prince did was he used the structure and the arrangement of his music as the pattern to say, that's what you're going to know me for. I'm going to come in with a track that you've never heard before. It won't feel like any of my other stuff, which I apologize for the surprise, but you're going to end up digging it. But as soon as he does his breaks and his songs, his breaks are some of the best in the world. I mean, you want the break is so good that it's like, I don't know, man, it's dessert in the middle of the song. You want that dessert to be like the whole song, but if it was, you wouldn't appreciate it as much. So again, like I said at the beginning of the episode, if 7.5 is the volume that works for you, there is an infinite number of things you can do within the 7.5 range to listen to, an infinite amount of music, to have an infinite number of wonderful experiences, and experiences that you don't like so much, but it's not some kid getting raped. Stephen Fry, the British comedian, he's in his 50s, he gets interviewed about God, and he says, I can't believe in God. And they said, why? He goes, because kids get tortured. And I don't think that a God would ever allow that to happen. And when I heard that, I thought, wow, that was really naive. And if you guys have listened to my season 1 episodes and you remember them, I mentioned this whole situation and I sort of opposed his rationale there. And now what I'm doing in my mind is saying, well, the God that we have created on paper wouldn't allow that to occur. But the one that may exist, because I have a conscience, I have a consciousness. Again, I've seen very spiritual things happen that I can't explain. So there's some ecosystem of our life that doesn't end. Guarantee it. It doesn't mean that God is who man has ever written down one time. But what if God is more like the rich dad and he's sitting in the car, he has picked us up from the convenience store and we're telling God, man, I don't want to be a stock boy anymore. I am more capable than this. But now, just riffing here. What if God says, well, okay, here's the deal. In that book about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the father was able to pick you up from a convenience store and take you to another place and give you another job, another responsibility, sit you down at a sofa and teach you something. In this world, we don't do surprise changes, meaning you don't just go, okay, you complain, you explain yourself, you make a lot of sense, and all of a sudden you wake up tomorrow and it's a whole different world. You know what I mean? It's like literally physically different, like a dream. No, you still got to finish this life, and there's a lot of other important things you're going to finish. If you think you're having an epiphany now about what you want to do with your life outside of this prison planet that we're in, wait till you get to the next life. Wait till you get to the next place. You're going to appreciate it more. I'll probably call this episode Prison Planet, because here's something I've been thinking about. I've been thinking about making that episode for a long time. I have told you guys that, and I may have mentioned this just briefly in a different episode, but here we go again for the full-blown explanation of what I'm thinking. I've told you guys that I see, I haven't had this happen, kind of happened to me the other day, but not the really good, vivid kind. And there's I'm driving down the highway and I'll get a feeling. I got it the other day laying down in bed. It was really interesting where it was almost as I was going to bed, I was starting to feel like the room that I'm in is not the room that I'm in. I'm in one of those better worlds. And, some psychologists may try to say, well, that's your desperation. You're inventing things. You're starting to go there because you don't like your life and whatever. This is so absolutely vivid THX sound, beautiful Technicolor overlay of this world that I don't buy it. Being just some trite hallucination in my brain. But I see those other worlds, and there's something that I didn't put together until probably last 6 to 8 months, and it goes something like this. When I explain those overlays to you, and Tesla had the same thing, it was crazy. In his 1919 biography, he talked about this. Autobiography. He saw those other worlds. I'm thinking, whoa, birds of a feather, baby. You get the sense, one, that it's not tremendously physically different than this world. I mean, it's different, but it's not completely different. And what I will tell you this, you flat earthers are going to love this statement, and I'm not telling you this to make you happy, but I definitely get worlds that are very containerish feeling. And it feels wonderful. It feels amazing. And I think it's because there's perhaps it's that part is answered for me. Where we are, it ceases to become such a mystery when you feel like you got a roof over your head, even if it looks like the sky. So I've had that feeling several times as an underlying sort of subtext to what I'm feeling. But the other big epiphany is that this is a happy world and that everyone I'm next to for a split second, it lasts 1 or 2 seconds when this occurs, right? I'm seeing it and I'm feeling it, is that the people have their shit together in this other world. I'm not quite sure how this would work chronologically with being an adult, dying, and being reborn. But now what if, and that'll make sense here in a second. My epiphany has been, what if we are simply ascending our soul and our personality and our capabilities to be qualified to live in those other worlds? Meaning they're really nice and they really know right from wrong. And the more that this world goes to shit, you can really see it. You can really, really see it and feel it. So when you're privileged enough to go into that other world, which from what I gather is a melting pot, you now understand why they behave and you're ready to behave. And all that means is do no harm more accurately in a world where everyone else understands that. And then what ends up happening is, and again, I'm coming from the perspective of being a creative person my entire life. That's how I make my money. That's how I've had all my fun. That's how I've made my friends, blah, 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 blah. So for me, everything is based on being creative. And when I think about transitioning out of this shit show into a world where everyone's just ready to go, and it's not even like a starting point for them, I'm joining a program already in session. Every time I see these places, I think about like, okay, I had 20 movie treatments on this Word document that it's a growing document, and I've written 5 of them now. I've been hired to write more. And man, now I can just finish all of them. And there's another 100, if not 1,000 more ideas coming, because now I'm not fighting the universe at the same time I'm trying to fight my art. When I want to sit down and paint an oil painting, which takes a long time, paint doesn't dry fast, I've got the time and I'm not worried about the world going to shit while I'm trying to be creative and contribute something to society that will hopefully uplift them for even just a moment. Music. My God, music, Trent Reznor seemed to think that he had to be, abused to write good music. No, he needs to be abused to write his music. So maybe he wants to stick around here for a long time and get pounded in some prison or something so he can write his next album. Not me. I want to write the next symphony, the next sonnet, the next badass funk track, that's just like, hey, when the song Celebration came out by Kool and the Gang, the world was a good place. And that song came out at the same time. Not to say they didn't have their own trials and tribulations and all that good stuff. And we as listeners had our own. And again, the worlds never get to a point where they're completely perfect. What am I talking about? I'm not talking about a world where, I need a wife or want a wife. And so I go down to a place where people are and I just simply pick out the most beautiful girl I can find. And I'm guaranteed she's going to like me. It's like that Twilight Zone where the guy was a bank robber or something. He gets chased by the cops and he gets shot up in the alleyway. And miraculously, this big fat guy shows up who's a very famous actor from the 60s. Amazing dude. I forgot his name. But he shows up like the angel from heaven. And he's like, well, you're done. You're done in this world. Come with me. I'm going to take you back to your penthouse. Takes him, and the guy doesn't trust him, right? I have to check and see if that was Eli Wallach. But anyway, he goes in and he's like, hey, this can't be real. Oh, he says, oh, this is all real. And he thinks he's in heaven. And he gets everything he wants. Women, gambling, best buds. They go off and do things and hang out at casinos and stuff. And he has amazing parties. But then when he's playing gambling, he's realizing he's winning all the time. And then he complains to the old man. He's like, hey. I don't want to win all the time. What the hell is this? You got to make me lose every once in a while. He says, okay, well, we can arrange you for you to lose every once in a while. He says, nah, I don't want it like that. I want it to be organic. I want it to be real. And eventually he realizes he didn't go to heaven. He went to hell. And he's getting everything he wants. So I'm definitely not talking about that algorithm. I understand that very, very much. But think about the difference between a gladiator show on TV and that amazing one in Japan. It's an obstacle course that's screwing with you. Every year they redesign it, and you're not just running from point A to point B. They got all kinds of things to mess with you, water and crazy obstacles that basically test the very apex of your physical capability. And then you watch the Olympics, and there's a girl ice skating on an ice rink, and she's trying to do a triple spin axel thing or whatever, backflip. And there's a difference between those two worlds, right? One is messing with you and you're electing to be in it. And the other one is leaving you alone to perfect your skills. Someone's not going to, what's her name's not going to come out, and Tanya Harding's not going to smack you in the knees or have her boyfriend do it. No one's going to be picking you off with a rifle and shooting the ground as you go by. Nope, you're out there on your own, and you will succeed or fail to the degree you are nervous and your skills are polished. That's the world we're looking for, in my opinion. I was just watching an episode by Big Herc, fresh out, and it was a few years old. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that's a show where Big Herc did 8.5 years in jail for robbing a bank. He knows it was a very stupid thing he did. He was actually a very smart kid. He's a skateboarder. Actually lived in Huntington Beach for a little while as a kid. So he has no business doing what he did. I don't know why he did it. He talks about it. And so now he's out, and he's got a bunch of different channels on YouTube. One of them's called Fresh Out, which is amazing. He interviews these other inmates who have now gotten out and gotten a successful job, and now they're trying to talk to kids in the ghetto from ever committing crimes. Don't do this to yourself, And so they tell their stories. And he said, when you're in prison, you don't have any friends. There are no friends in prison. He says the guards don't like you. The other inmates don't like you. The warden definitely doesn't like you. And everyone's always scamming against you constantly. Constantly. And he said you learn the game. You learn how to transform yourself so that no one feels safe around you either. And he did this thing where he talked about when you bring your commissary back to your cell and you're counting it, making sure you got what you paid for, right? And he says someone will come in and go, oh, you got that neat stuff. And they're playing really coy with you. And he does this, on camera, he does this transformation where he looks at the camera and he puts this super mean face on, man. He's like, yeah, what about it? Like, get out of here, And it was an amazing example of how that works. Is that the world you want to live in, luckily on this planet, as much as I'm being cynical about the outcome of the few controlling the many, we do have the many who are actually good-spirited. Even the people going off and getting their Wednesday treatments and wearing the death apparatus on their face, they're just not that smart. And, people are trying to get all offended so you can't say that about them. It's like, fuck that. Sorry, man. You're not that smart. Where to go in and out of a store for 5 minutes or whatever. I got to do that too. Because I don't want to eat fast food every single day. But the most I've ever worn the thing is probably less than 5 minutes. Because I know what I want. I know where it is in the store. I get in, I get out. And I'm lucky to live in a place that isn't militant about it. But I've been kicked out of 2 restaurants so far. And I've been very polite as I'm leaving. And one kid was very polite to me as I left. And one kid told me to go fuck myself. It was at a Round Table Pizza. Amazing. That's the first thing out of his mouth. I'm sitting there going, dude, I didn't threaten you. I didn't call you any names. I didn't say anything about you personally. I just said I thought the policy of the state was not necessary. I'm the only person in the entire restaurant, not a single other human being, and I'm like 12 feet away from this kid. Unbelievable, right? But that's the kind of punk-ass kids we're raising these days, right? Scrawny kid, too. Scrawny kid. It's like, if he didn't see his mortality, possibly ending, he was a scrawny kid. You could have knocked him out in one punch, and it doesn't matter how many Gracie classes he takes, he's going down. But that just tells you how low his IQ is. It's even lower than you thought. But he's been taught he's being virtuous. Isn't that unbelievable? Wow. The Russian KGB guy, I swear to God. I put that on the website, by the way. He said, we're going to make good, bad, bad, good. And when you tell an American the truth, they simply will deny it. And, if you'd heard that in the 80s, you'd have been like, who is this fucking guy, right? And then in the end, you're like, oh my God, he was totally right. The Russians conquered the United States of America psychologically. All with the Marxist regime of the banking system, of which is already wrapped up and totally packaged all the rest of the countries in the world, but America. I mean, I hear about, Iceland and these little tiny countries, Norway perhaps, or something like that. And you're like, yeah, I'm glad that there seems to be some gun ownership and they didn't fall into this 2020 trap like everybody else. They didn't have any cases of any disproportional amounts, but they're not touched because that's where some of those folks live that control the world. And two, they're just not significant enough. They're going to be popped like a pimple at the very last minute. Oh, you still got your guns? Okay, well, the whole world doesn't, so we're just going to come take them from you. So do whatever you want to do. Your land will be our land. Your whole bloodline's going to disappear. Yeah, we're going to do it from space because we've convinced all your citizens that satellites don't exist. Every single time you've ever heard about a corporation changing something that they didn't want to change before, why is it that they ever made the change in the first place? Because protests occurred. And not the kind where you blow up a building and all this other stuff. It's because you simply stopped buying the product. You wrote them something. You created a movement where they were passé. And it's interesting. I mean, one of the phenomenons that I just can't understand anymore is Apple Computer. They have gathered up at a brilliant formula to say, look, we don't make the best computers anymore. We've got features that are way better than Windows, but that doesn't counteract the fact that Windows computers are twice as fast as ours for half the price, or the same price, I should say, right? But we've got paint and steel and glass. And so, one, we're going to make them look cooler than all the other computers in the world, and they do that hands down. I don't think their phones are that sexy, but then they embedded a social movement into their company to create a fabric where these kids actually believe that company cares about anything, man. And they're claiming to be on board with all this green stuff. I'm just showing you some of the oxymorons of the world. Apple is notorious for changing the ports on their computers, on their phones, creating all of this metric tons, and I mean millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of pounds of plastic, steel that will never be recycled. It's going to go into a trash can. It's going to go into a landfill, and it will never be recycled. And this is your green company. They're coming out with a new operating system that has all white backgrounds. That's your wallpaper the computer's going to ship with the new iMac. The little weird one that's got like 8 gig of RAM in it. I mean, my phone's got as much RAM as this computer, if not twice as much. Okay. So, you're green. I'm an LED expert, okay? When you blow out an LED white, a couple things happen. One, you use a hell of a lot more power, even though the screens are more efficient than old tube televisions. Well, forget tube comparisons. We don't have them anymore. We're all flat screen now. So that's the metric. That's the baseline of using power. So blowing out a background all white means you're consuming a ton more power. 2, you're killing the life of the LED, which is a very old life. I mean, very long life, I should say. But you're killing your computer. So they're promoting the death of their computer by just changing the color of the background of your computer. Websites like Instagram still don't have dark mode, night mode. Every time you launch that website, your battery on your phone, your battery on your browser and your computer is putting a pitch white, background on the background, blowing out your monitor, blowing out your power. But they're a green company. For those of you who aren't coders, to make a website have a white night option is a day's work. A week's work if you have retarded coders, okay? So, the reason why I mentioned that little digression is that I think that's the same way you deal with all leadership everywhere it is. Why'd I bust Juan O'Savin's balls in an episode when I don't attack anybody? It's like I'm trying to pressure the situation. Optics and narratives will go as long as everyone's okay with it. And by having all these channels up there constantly writing blank checks for all these promises, or maybe even lack of promises, but lack of progress, stealing elections and that kind of stuff, being totally okay. Yeah. Let's not say anything, guys. Let's not say anything because we don't want to upset somebody. Let's not tell Apple we want the computers to be as fast as PCs and look good at the same exact time and cost the same exact amount of money. Let's not upset Tim Cook, who isn't a Wozniak and isn't a Jobs and never ever will be. He was instrumental in taking his own sexual orientation and getting the LGBT community to feel like if they bought an Android or a Windows 10 machine, that they were somehow insulting their own movement. It's two separate things. Two separate things. Use your computer, whatever one you have, to push your movement forward. That's great. Doesn't matter which one it is. You break. No corporation cares about you. Trust me. Least of all in the world, medical corporations. You are an ATM to them, and that's all you'll ever be. There's cures for everything, but they'll never, ever release them. Not unless the world changes. I mean, Bug's Life, man. Pixar, Bug's Life. They taught you what you need to do in a kid's movie. Isn't that the first movie after Toy Story? People watch it. They don't get it. They're all too happy to please the grasshoppers. I don't know. Standing before God and having to admit, yeah, you turned the screws in on me and I just took it. Is that my job? Is that what I'm here to do? To take it? To somehow prove loyalty to some super mega narcissistic asshole? I don't think so. That means I'm more advanced than God. And I just sort of think that's not probably the case. So the definition I've been given for God is all flawed. And it's a huge double standard, catch-22 bunch of horse crap, All forgiving but wrathful, all intelligent, all graceful but gets angry. I've done episodes about all this stuff, man. Does God get angry? It's a whole episode. Do we want to be in a secular atheist hole of life? Nah. In my life experience and all the stuff I've shared with you guys, that negates the world, because the more you become secular, there's another phrase for secular, which is closed-minded. Would I have ever seen Walt at Disneyland being a complete atheist? Probably not. My brain wouldn't have allowed him to get in touch with me, nor would I think he would see in me anything worth spending his time communicating with me in the first place. I think when I go into that park and I'm seeing the filter between the corporate sponsorship and all the crap they did to his franchise after he died, and I'm just looking at his fingerprints everywhere and appreciating to the maximum amount of my consciousness and appreciation for creativity and art and beauty and love. He can see my soul and he goes, there's one right there. And he's open-minded enough, I bet he can see me, And he walks up and goes, Bob Gurr's right over there. You should go say hi. I don't think that if I had a lack of spirituality, that would ever happen. I don't think it'd be possible. We wouldn't be compatible. Anyway, let me know what you think. Have you ever been mad at God? And if you have you ever let him know? It has nothing to do with, your belief in God. It really doesn't. It may have to do with your belief in what God is. In the Computer Chronicles episode, I mentioned a little scam piece of software that was out there that told you that it was doubling the RAM in your computer. It was a complete lie. The software did nothing and they got sued. But they ran away with most of the money. They sold the software, I think, for $80 and sold damn near 100 million copies of this stuff. So, what would you rather have? A piece of software that tells you that you've got double the RAM in your computer, even though you don't. So you're having, at best, a placebo experience that this is actually happening. Or would you rather go get the extra RAM and actually have a faster computer? But now, what if you're worried about hurting the feelings of the people who wrote the scam software? And so you're like, well, I just don't want to say anything. It's whatever. I was being stupid when I bought the software. And you never go get the other memory. And so you're living with fake software on your computer. You're not getting the memory that you need to make your computer hold more programs to run faster, what have you. What are you? You're not even a Stockholm Syndrome person. I mean, you kind of are a little bit, but you're not really even having the courage to be that. So I say, you uninstall, you sue for your money back, and you go get the memory. And then you learn the lesson. Shame on you, and don't get shame on me going, right? Anyway, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. Everything you need is up there. You want to bookmark it so that you don't lose us if we get moved around. Again, I think things are calming down quite a bit. A couple ways to donate to the movements up there. I just always want to mention that because I have to say thank you to my Patreons. They made 2020 suck a whole lot less, let me tell you. So thank you so much for your hard-earned money going my way. I endeavor to reward you. Anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.